All right, I am here with John McGuire. Middle name is your middle name actually Hambone?
No, that's not my actual God-given middle name. That's a gimmick, man. That's a
That's
gimmick
a
for about
gimmick. All right,
20
gimmick
years.
middle name. Oh
Yeah.
no, it's a good one, but it's one of the things you never know these days, and I don't want to insult someone when that's who's going to say Hambone was my grandfather's name, and we fought in the Great War or something, and I'll feel all terrible.
Yeah, no, he was World War II. His name was Richard, but that's neither here nor there.
It's all good. Well, thanks for coming. The great Pex, aka John Barnhouse, put us together.
Yeah, man.
Really happy for. So I guess before we get into 3, 2, 1 action and then Point Nemo, why don't you tell me how you got into this crazy tabletop game, gaming world we live in?
God, I'm 42, so when I was 25, I finally got to play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and I fell in love with it. I came in. I think we were playing 3-5, and in my world, the people that I play with, one of whom is Stu Horvath. He is Vintage RPG. Um, they knew all about all these other games, but like me, I was a touring musician, and I'd only ever heard the words Dungeons and Dragons and the idea behind Dungeons and Dragons. So, there wasn't a ton of game stores where I was growing up, or that I didn't know of at the time, and so I knew nothing outside of Dungeons and Dragons. So I played Dungeons and Dragons for a bunch of years and started migrating into other games, other styles of play. And I've been doing it ever since and loving it and loving finding out about new games and having new gaming experiences.
That's awesome. Are you, I know you're in New Jersey. Are you born and bred, raised?
Absolutely, man. I grew up
And
in a
so,
town called
no, go
Clifton,
ahead.
and I
Oh,
live in a
okay.
called Kearney now. Yeah.
So how was it coming to 3.5? So I feel like it's interesting because now we're in this kind of new heyday of tabletop gaming. What were your preconceptions when you came to it as an adult? Did you have those kind of satanic panic or just kind of Revenge of the Nerds sort of references in your brain, or the cartoon, or what did you have in mind when you?
So to me, it's all that meme that says, what I do, what my friends think I do, what I really do, kind of thing. So I grew up. I watched the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and I loved it. And I would see the toys in Toys R Us on the shelves and whatever. And it always perplexed me because the only one you saw from the cartoon was Warduke. Like that's the only, like, one of the few that ever popped up in the cartoon, but like you couldn't get, like, you know the Ranger, the Paladin, or whatever. You couldn't get the Unicorn for damn sure. So it kind of faded out for a while. When I was in high school, everyone was starting a band, so my focus wasn't really on playing games. And then in my 20s, I became friends with many of the people that I'm friends with now, and they would always tell me these like great stories about, like, they've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since they were like in like the fourth grade, and you know I wanted to get in on it, and they started playing again, and I was lucky enough to make it to the table at that point. But you know, it was immediately, I think I bit off more than I could chew because I am not really great with reading like heavy books, or like going like, unless it has like a story in it. If there's a story in it, and if there's pictures in it, even better. But I'm not really great with like textbooks, and for all intents and purposes, most game books are textbooks.
Oh yeah.
So, and then coming in at 3.5, I think it was a little crunchier than I was ready for. But I had a lot of great people at the table who have been playing forever, and they were really cool about like teaching me about it and learning about it. And we went from there. We went from 3.5. We went to second. We went back to second edition, and so we started playing second edition because there hit a point when my buddies were like, "We should have just never stopped playing second edition." So we went back to do second edition, and then when I started running Dungeons and Dragons, I was like, I want to run like Dungeons and Dragons. So I started running first edition D&D. That was my entry into actually running adventures in Dungeons and Dragons. And in a lot of ways, I found first edition D&D to be really kind of easy to understand. Like, some stuff, obviously, in all of these, every edition just doesn't make sense. But compared to like 3.5, my experience with first edition was a lot easier for me, and I really enjoyed that. And also, like, all the art was like really great.
Yeah, there is something to that kind of older art style. And so you got the itch to try out other game systems. Was something that you as individually, or you as in your gaming group, or because a lot of folks don't ever make that transition from D&D to other than D&D. So I'm curious how you got to that.
Well, a lot of it was, we hit fourth edition. Fourth edition came out, and a lot of people that I was playing with, a lot of people that I started playing with, because I also just started playing in different groups. Like I played in like several D&D groups because I just couldn't get enough of it. I loved it. And when I was in town and I wasn't on the road, I'd always try to play with different people. I would like pick up games in stores when I was out of town because I miss playing. And so fourth edition happened, and a lot of people were hype on it at first, but as they continued to play, it just wasn't for them, especially if they'd been playing for a longer time. I found it awesome because I thought it was a very good entry point into Dungeons and Dragons. And so we started migrating to other things. I think we played the Castles and Crusade for a little bit. We started playing other things that were in the vein of Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, but then I started like, as I'm going to these game stores, I start seeing other boxes, so it's not just Dungeons and Dragons. You're just like, well, that looks pretty cool. That's Shadowrun. It's like, what's Call of Cthulhu? Call of Cthulhu sounds awesome. Like, and so I would start dipping my toe into other games and other systems, and that's how ultimately, like, when people kind of stopped playing D&D again for a little bit, we found our way back to D&D, and then from there we just started going into things like Call of Cthulhu. And I 2 years ago, I think right before the pandemic, I guess at this point, we wrapped up like a year and a half Mass and Nyla at the Tap campaign, which was pretty cool. So I was pretty psyched about that.
Wow, that's awesome. So you went from being a player to did you go full time DMing, or did you kind of do rotating, or what
I
was that
ended up
experience?
DMing more than I would be a player, and that's actually how it's been for me for like, I don't know, 5-7 years now. Because a lot of people want to play, but they don't want to do any kind of prep work. I really don't do hardly any prep work at this point. Like I'll skim it, and I just kind of like let it go where it goes. Like right now, I've had a group that I've been playing D&D with for since the beginning of the pandemic. We still do it over Discord, and we do different campaigns. Like if they're like, oh, I really always wanted to try this mod, I'd run the mod. Or I years ago started the Temple of Elemental Evil with another group, and the group kind of parted ways because everyone kind of has stuff coming up. So I was like, I never finished Temple of Elemental Evil, and then I saw the Goodman Games reprint was coming out, and I was like, this is the right time of year for me to run this. So I pulled out Temple, and I ran Temple up until maybe about a month and a half ago. We ran it cover to cover. And then
How'd they do with that? Because that's a pretty brutal module in terms
they
of just.
they did good. They did good, and there was one point where they needed to run, and I didn't think they were going to run, but they ran, and I was like, the reason why you're going to survive this thing is because you actually did the right thing. Like, and I've never, and I mean, I don't know what your experience is, but I've hardly ever had a group run when they were supposed to run. And so they did, they ran, and they beat it. We got through Temple, and I think we're like 2 weeks into Severed Books put out the Dead Milkmen, Lost Tomb of the Bitch and Chimera. So we're running the Dead Milkmen fifth edition RPG right now, and then we'll get into something else in about a week when we wrap that up.
That's awesome. Running is one of those interesting things. I'm running a sort of BX D&D
Nice.
game with some mostly newer players, and they have fifth edition experience. But I definitely kind of beat into them a lot. Is that there's no shame in tactical treat, aka booking it if you don't think you can win, and they've been pretty. They've been doing a pretty good job. I mean, they're still very low level, and we play very slowly. But so far they've shown no qualms as to cutting bait at some point and saying, you know what, maybe we should either skip out on this combat or retreat or do whatever we have to do. So I'm proud of them on that one. But yeah, it's one of those things that's very hard to gauge, and that's why I hate when I see GMs planning to, oh, I'm going to make this encounter for my group to run away from. I'm like, you're planning more than likely for a TPK, because a lot of groups don't get that memo.
Yeah.
And so you got all this thing. You've been doing D&D, getting into Call of Cthulhu, doing other things, going from a player to maybe a full-time GM or close. What was in that journey inspired you to create your own game system, essentially?
So I've been wanting to write something for a long time, and I used to go to like the writing seminars at Gen Con, and I'd be like, this is the year I'm going to write my book. And then I would never write the book. Or I would get to that third page, man. I'd get to that third page, but writing's hard. Writing is definitely something difficult. So I started writing my own fifth edition stories. I never really wrote them down, but I'd write the broad strokes out. And run my own campaigns, original stories and stuff like that. But I never really had it in me to write like a long campaign. This was kind of like well, here's point A, here's point B. Let's have some fun getting there, and then like once you beat this boss, we'll roll up new characters and we'll start something else. And there's always the thought I was going to try to maybe write something and put it on Drive Through RPG. And they have all the great tools that if you want to do it, there is a great way to do it. But I just kind of every time I would start to write it, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I want to do something different. So that rode the pine for a bit, and then the pandemic happened, and I was sitting upstairs in my friend's apartment, and we're just shooting the breeze and talking about stuff. And I had been running different games. So during the pandemic, I didn't just run D&D. And I said this previously to someone that, I really appreciated Wizards because when the pandemic happened, they're like, here's all this free stuff. Play Dungeons and Dragons, like with your friends, do it over Discord or whatever. So, I had a lot of people who came to my virtual table who'd never played before, but they always kind of thought about it. But now, like, well, what the hell are you waiting for? You can't go outside. So I'd run D&D. And then once they got into D&D, they had a lot of fun with it. I was like, hey, what do you feel about trying something else? So I'd run Call of Cthulhu. And I'd run like right out of the starter set, just stuff right over the plate just to get people's feet wet. I ran Chill because I have an old Chill module with Elvira on it. So I thought I'd run that.
Oh, nice.
I ran Honey Heist. I ran Zweihander for Gen Con. I did that for them. I ran one of their Zweihander games at Gen Con. I was gonna run Mothership, but there was like a family emergency came up, so a buddy of mine tagged and ran Mothership, but I was like super close to running Mothership, and other like zines that would come out. Like I ran like the Phylactery from Planet X Games. Whatever I had or I was buying or getting, I would just run it, which is something that is unique because how often do we as people in games get something and then just get to run it? So I was doing that, and the common thread that I saw was there's always a barrier to entry, and people want to always do certain things that the rules don't allow. So I started like percolating an idea in my head for 3-2-1 action, and kicking around the rule set. It started as like an OSR kind of rule set, very a generic role playing D100, just a crawl. And then I was upstairs in my friend's apartment, and my friend's wife, my best friend Jen, she used to have a podcast called Notorious Narratives, and they were talking about doing an episode on a place called Point Nemo. She told me the story about Point Nemo, the spaceship graveyard in the middle of nowhere. That's where all the space debris falls and this and that. And I just started having these ideas, and I started running, and I started like just spitting out all these ideas off the top of my head. I'm like, well, what if it was this? What if it was this? I was like, man, maybe someday someone should figure this out and tell the story. And she's like, why don't you do it? Just do it. You've been saying you're going to write something for years. Why don't you do it? So I did it. So I locked myself in my apartment for a while. And on July 6th or 7th of 2020, I just started writing Point Nemo, and I started writing the rules for it. And Jen's husband, George, is my best friend, and he's been like my partner on so many different things in music and other endeavors and whatever. And he's a very good writer, and I wanted him to be a part of it, but I needed to finish the initial story myself because I had to prove to myself that I could do it. And then I did it, and I was very proud of myself, and I brought it to him, and then we completely tore it apart and built it better. But with the rules were intended to anyone who wants to play the game can just jump in. They can pick up the rules quick and play, and you can do all the cool things you've always wanted to do in games. But maybe there wasn't a way to do it, or maybe the person running the game couldn't figure it out, or maybe someone just told you no because they didn't want to figure it out. So that's where the idea of the 3-2-1 action rules came from. It's a cinematic storytelling engine based on the idea of jumping in, running wild, and having a good time.
So you started off with a D100 and you ended up with the D10. How many different iterations did it take you before you felt like D10 is where it's at? And why did you choose D10? What D10 over D100? What was the
Well, that's a great question.
thinking?
It only took one. I brought it up to George, and George was reading through it, and he's like, and the concepts, there was other concepts that were there, like to fill the plot hole in 2 sentences, a few other things, and he was like, you really want this to be easy? Yes. You really want this to be accessible for everybody? Yeah. Why don't you drop the 0? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's a D100 roll. He's like, a lot of math there with the percentiles. He's like, why don't you just make it a single D10 and have the whole thing run off of 1 dice? And then he pulled because there was multiple dice for the different weapons, D4, D12, D6. He's like, what is the biggest hurdle that you think is at every gaming table? I was like, when new people show up, they never know what dice to roll. And no matter how many times you tell a person roll the d20, you're gonna roll that for almost everything. They look down and they see 7 dice and they have that moment. So I was like, fuck, fudge, we're just gonna do one d10. And then like we took it from there. And the concept really was, watch my goddaughter, she's 4 now. And a lot of the time I would spend watching her watching Sesame Street or kids educational programs. And it was always like kids are counting to 10. And it's a broad generalization, but most people can count to 10 and do simple
I
addition
think that's a pretty
subtraction.
safe bet.
So I kind of felt good about it being 1 dice based off a d10. And then so we built it out from there with challenges based on 1, 2, or 3. Keeps it really simple, keeps it flowing.
Oh no, I mean I totally agree. I mean I've gotten in this conversation a lot with OSR folks. We find a lot of folks. I usually am in the OSR sphere a lot, and people love all their funky dice systems. And we're gonna D20 for this, and D6 for that, and D this for this, and percentile for that. And that's all great and it's all flavorful. But for new people, especially people who aren't in the hobby at all, the more you can just tell them, here's this one die. Take all those other dice you might have bought out of the little Chessex kit or whatever, and just put them to the side and just have this one die that you roll. It's just easier for them. Even if you think it's flavorful, even if you think it makes sense fictionally, why you're rolling this kind of die instead of the other one, just from a new player standpoint, forgetting all that stuff, it's just easier to say, hey, roll a d20. In your case, roll a d10. And that's all you have to worry about.
Yeah.
And it'll make it a much smoother experience.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love my dice.
Everybody loves dice.
I love having multiple, and I mean, this is just my daily drivers. I mean, I love having multiple different dice for doing things, but I've been in the hobby now for
yeah, that's the thing. I think it's kind of who are you writing your rules for, right? You're writing your rules for people who've been playing for 20 years, or you're writing your rules for someone who may. I have a 7-year-old, and I'm looking forward to starting her on her gaming journey. Is it going to be easier for me to explain something like 3, 2, 1 action that just says, here's this one die, or for me to get into, look at these 7 different dice and I'll tell you which ones to roll, and you might be rolling above and some and low below some other ones, and like I can just see her eyes beginning to glaze over already.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've had people who've been in the hobby for decades play my game, and they love it because they're having the same entry experience as the person who's saddling up to the table for the first time. And I think that's cool because it takes the energy away from trying to figure out how to do stuff to just doing stuff and just kind of like giving yourself over to the experience and playing.
Absolutely. Did you ever play Toon, perchance?
I did not.
Oh, because to me, it has a. I can't even remember what it's like mechanically because it's been forever since I've played it. But I felt like there was some kinship with 3, 2, 1 action in the sense of just feeling uninhibited to just do whatever you want to do. Because in Toon, you can't even really die. It's basically you die until the next scene because it's like a cartoon, right? So there's, you can fall off a cliff like Wile E. Coyote, and then they'll show, the poof of dust, and then when it breaks to the next thing, you're back. So you can really feel just open. And in the case of 3, 2, 1 action, I really like the kind of the luck thing, but also that idea that, hey, just make up somebody else and, implicitly or explicitly saying, get them back in the game, come up with that, use that. The other concept I really like was that the plot hole 2 sentences, like use something like that to figure out how this new person is back in the mix or got to you guys, and then just go, right, and not get all wrapped up in the more complex stuff, which can be great. I love that stuff, but certainly for the kind of for sort of a more lighthearted, just sort of fun game, who cares? Just you just want the gang to get back together.
Exactly. And listen, I don't think that there is a wrong play style. I love my friends and the experiences I've had with my friends who like the super crunchy games. I love the experiences that I have with my friends who are just like, I want to roll this D6 and I want to be a bear that wears a hat. The luck point thing really came from George because I initially had it as hit points, and I came up with an idea for it was initially hit points and guts penalties, and the concept was, hit points were going to be for things that make you bleed, and then the guts checks and ultimately the guts penalties are for things like, if you twist your knee, if you fall off a curb the wrong way, if you've got a bad hangover, you get into a car accident, fall down a flight of stairs, stuff that won't kill you per se, but it's going to inhibit the way that you're able to perform overall. And it's something I hadn't really seen in a lot of other games, trying to express both of those concepts and try to do it simply. And George was like, well, everyone does hit points. He's like, this is cinematic. Think about a movie. Why not it be luck points instead? And George is, for those joining now, is the co-creator of 3-2 in Action, the co-writer. He's my partner in crime. And I thought that was great because one of the things you can also do with your luck is if you blow a roll for an action check or something where you're going to be trying to achieve something, you could actually sacrifice some of your luck points, essentially your life, to push your luck to be able to make the roll because you're, say, swinging from a vine over a pit of lava, and when you're trying to jump to that next vine, you blew the roll and you're like, well, I could spend like 3 of my luck points and definitely make this swing, or I could roll the dice and see what happens when I fall in the lava. So you have the ability to push your luck. And then with the guts thing, it works out pretty good too, because there's certain things where, say you get attacked by a creature with like a claw. So it's making you bleed, but at the same time, it's really hurting your overall hard candy shell. So you have to make a guts check to see if it's going to really affect you. And if it does, you're going to get an ongoing guts penalty. 3 of those ongoing guts penalties, all your stats drop by 1, making it harder to do anything because, like anything else, like you blow your knee out, it's going to be hard for you to kind of keep on moving forward. But if you get 4 guts penalties, you die. So you could run out of luck, or you could get so beat up your body just gives out.
Yeah, the luck points, I think they're both really good. The luck points, I think, resonate with me partly because I've been thinking about a similar mechanic. I really like the idea of, especially when we're thinking of hit points, as I like to, as an abstraction of not just your health, but your basically ability to do things, ability to your wherewithal. Almost, I think is a good word, right? Things are trying to kill you. What helps you avoid it? That's your kind of thing. And when that runs out, the next thing that hits you, and you weren't able to get out of the way, it just smashes your skull in or whatever. And I really liked that idea of using that as kind of your overall energy. And so that you could take abilities and use those to power it, which to me would make for a great, I always love those, risk reward type things.
Yeah.
Do I do a bunch of stuff? Do I use my luck, but knowing that now I have a small reservoir and I have less chance for error, or do I hold back and keep all of my luck until I really need it? I love players thinking about that stuff, and it becomes like a really great, I think, way to sort of give them abilities, to give them options without it overpowering the game, because there's a price tag attached. Yeah. Sure, I'm not going to tell you can't do this thing 800 times. Do you have 800 luck points to do it, or how low do you want to go? How much luck do you want to try to spend and hope it doesn't burn you on it?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had players who, we wrote about it in the rules and in a couple other places, the heroic sacrifice, where they have so minimal luck points left, but they have a grenade or something. And they're like, well, I'm going to stay behind and hold them off so you guys can make it, because there's no way I am going to make it, because it's either this creature on the next round of combat, next turn in combat, is going to attack me, and if he hits me once, I'm going to die, or I could take this grenade and I could run into like the swarm of them and blow myself up, kill a bunch of them, and give you guys the opportunity to escape. Because it's something that we've also not seen in a lot of games, where you have a character who can actually do something like that. So we wanted to try to give it that real cinematic feel, giving you agency for your player to do the things that you want to do and play kind of the game your way and be the character that you want to be in the story.
And it definitely fits into your kind of cinematic tropes, right? Because that is something you see in movies all the time. The one guy who's too hurt, he's broken his leg, he's already mortally wounded, but he's not dead yet, and and they hand him the button or the grenade or whatever, have him launch the bomb, and then he'll be there, and then that presence of that character allows everyone else to escape. I was going to ask you, what made you, because you're kind of going for this whole 80s, sort of sci-fi-ish action kind of thing, was how did that come out? Why did you choose that as your particular genre?
Well, it was my first thing that I ever written, and that kind of stuff I know like the back of my hand. So Point Nemo was initially, what we're doing now was initially the original story. That's where this,
that was going to be my next question. It seems like it came to Point Nemo, then the rules, then you went back and did another module, and now you've gone full circle to Point Nemo. Is that right, with the evolution?
Yeah, more or less. So we had the Point Nemo, we had the thing going, and Zine Quest was going to happen. And I really wanted to be a part of Zine Quest. George and I really wanted to be a part of Zine Quest, and we knew it was a great opportunity to get our game out there because we knew that there's going to be a lot of energy on Zine Quest. Every year, Zine Quest brings in so many people, so we thought it was a great idea to get our feet wet. And George was like, "Well, what if we did like a prequel to Point Nemo? We show you what happens on the island before the events of Point Nemo, so we could write something shorter and do it for Zine Quest." And my goal here was also trying to make things really accessible for people. And, I have bad back problems. So the idea of bringing like 3 heavy books with me everywhere was a lot. So I was like, every book that we make, we're going to put the rules in. And so we put the rules in, and then we wrote Rocket to Russia, which was the first adventure that came out because of Zine Quest. And it did not end up being short. It ended up being 100 and like, I don't know, 8 pages all said and done from cover to cover. So it went from being like, we're going to write a zine and put the rules in the zine as well, thinking maybe we're going to go like 60 pages, to going a lot longer. So it ends up being a really true, honest to God, full length adventure with the monsters, the rules, everything you need in there to play it, bonus rules that we came up with to preview other things that we're going to do. And then we're come back around to the story of Point Nemo, and finally doing the story of Point Nemo, which is without the rules already at like 100 something pages. So it's going to be legit.
So
But the rule,
how many sessions do you imagine 100 some odd pages in your kind of system to be? Because it seems like a lot, even in like an OSR D&D sense. I'm thinking, wow, 100 pages, that's pretty serious.
so I mean, granted, it's an A5 size book, so it's not like 108.5 by 11 pages. It's 100 something pages A5. That being said, because the system is so easy to play and easy to pick up and very streamlined, where you're just rolling the one dice, it's really easy to keep your players on the edge of the knife the entire time and keep things moving. And even if they go into the weeds, go off on the rabbit trail, it's easy to kind of bring them back or let them have the experience that they're looking to have in the weeds on the rabbit trail, and then kind of loop them back in. Um, Rocket to Russia, I've gotten to a point where I could run it cover to cover in 3.5, 4 hours, one night
Okay.
setting. Yeah, but Rocket to Russia, in fairness, is also very much on the rails because it was my first adventure that I wrote, and like, trying to keep the thing going, and getting used to writing. Point Nemo is on the rails ish, but there's still different things you can explore, different ways you can go. But ultimately, there's a point on the island, a B point, but there's side quests and different things you can do as well.
Do you feel like the kind of look you're that look the sort of vibe you're going for and everything is kind of built more for on the rails type stuff? Because I mean, if you think about movies and TV show, they kind of they sort of follow a fairly on the rails treatment for the most part. You don't spend tons of time in a TV show where like the party the A team is in the jungle and they're just kind of looking around and going, oh, which way should we go now? I don't know,
Yeah.
boss. Let's camp for a few more days.
Yeah, the minute they find the hose and the duct tape, the episode's over. Um, yes and no. I mean, yes, it's absolutely perfect, 100%. If you're going to run something on the rails, this is, if you have an A and a B point ready to get to, we're going to get you there. However, it does work good open world. Uh, you know, the caveat being, with anything open world, and this is an experience that I've had as a dungeon master, as a game master, as a keeper of secrets, all that stuff. Um, you got to know where you ultimately need to go. So we're in the process right now of writing 321 horror, and that is going to be open world to a degree. Like, there's an area where you're going to be. It's complete. You can go anywhere in like the whole area and whatever, do all the different things you want to do. However, there's going to be 3 or 4 different triggers that will move it on to the next part of the story. And then you go to the next part of the story. You can still keep doing the things you want to do, but once you hit the certain point, it sets up the next part of the story. And then eventually you go home with it, you do the final boss fight and whatever. But it's kind of going to be the best of both worlds. If you want to explore a little more, you can do that, but you're not going to be completely aimless. Like, you're eventually going to get to where you got to go.
Are the triggers going to be things like player actions, or is it a number of days going past? Is it? I mean, in horror, sometimes you can have both, right? You have the book that you don't know to decipher, then you end up reading from it, and that starts it off. Or the whole this is going to happen on the full moon, and now we're on the new moon, and it's coming.
It's going to be over the course of a night. Um, it's going to be over the course of one night, and there are things that you will do in game that will set something off. Ultimately, because it's a game, and no one's actually exact to the minute time of what's happening in the game. It's just things that are happening, and you are experiencing them. And the cool thing is with 3, 2, 1 action, we give you the ability to quickly roll up a character if your character dies, or like if suddenly one of your character dies. Well, here's this other pre-generated character. They got lost. It split up from the group, and now they found you again, and that's all you really need to know. Now they're suddenly here. It doesn't really break the narrative or kind of take you out of the game and put you in a spot where now you have to explain a bunch of stuff. Now it's just like, oh yeah, no, we got split up in the jungle, and here's Bill. Bill's back.
Or you're gonna go for that Thing vibe where Bill's back, but don't know if you could trust Bill. Bill may have a strange gleam in his eye now.
It's funny. I actually saw a meme today, and I think you're probably familiar with the Spider-Man meme where Spider-Man and is pointing at Spider-Man, is pointing at Spider-Man, and they're doing the thing. So the same meme, except it's the end of the thing. And everyone's like pointing at each other, like, because you never know. But that's the kind of thing I ultimately want to be able to do is, and while we're writing all this stuff, I write other concepts down and thoughts. So like in the process of writing the main 3, 2, 1 horror story, I'm in the process of also writing I call it a zombie fun run, where this one is going to be a little more on the rails with exploration, but you got to get from where you are to where you need to go during like a zombie thing that's happening. So I came up with like new rules for getting bitten by zombies and how that works in the game and whatnot.
Oh, very cool. Oh, I was gonna ask, so are you adding some new mechanics on top of 3, 2, 1 action for 3, 2, 1 horror? Are you gonna have some kind of insanity, or is it something else?
Yeah, it's not necessarily going to be insanity, but there are several rules that I look at more as like a costume rather than a change of what things are, because we really want people to know the rules and know how to play the game. But every time we come out with a new theme, there's going to be like 3 or 4 rules that are specific or a gimmick for that theme. Like, so the zombie game, for instance, is like, what happens when you get bit? What happens when you turn? If you have to roll a new character, like, how do they have the gear that they have? And like, there's different charts you could roll on. But the idea is, it's just like, oh well, today I'm wearing my my little vampire hat because it's a vampire game. Tomorrow, I'm wearing the monocle because we're gonna try to rob a bank or something like. But it's all the same core rules with just a few extra little gimmicks for that specific set.
Yeah, that's cool. And for returning people, they'll already be familiar with the rules and they'll be able to pick up on the new one. And then your system is so, I think, so simple in a good way that if somebody is completely new and they do have a couple of wrinkles thrown on top of it, it's still a very easy to learn, simple system, as opposed to, I don't know, here's first edition, and then we're going to drop, the whole other, huge book of rules on top of you, where it's like, holy cow, now it's, that's a lot. Tell me about the Point Nemo. So it's kind of funny because I didn't know it was a new place. I thought, oh, you just made up a name for a place. And I remember I put it into the Google machine to find your Kickstarter link, and I didn't put Kickstarter in, so I thought, well, what kind of results am I going to get if I just throw Point Nemo? That should be at the top of the list. But nope, I got all kinds of other stuff, which was like, whoa. So there is an actual place, Point Nemo, but I had no idea. So tell me about it.
So I love the concept when I heard about it, that there's all this like space wreckage and stuff just hanging out in the middle of the ocean, but that's where it all is meant to fall or disposed of because it's the furthest point from any like human life in the world. And so I was like, man, what if something fell from space and it caused an island to form there or like whatever? And so I started building this story around like, well, like now you have this island, like what's happening on the island? And, I had all these crazy ideas for, weird sci-fi stuff that's happening, but also like it's Predator. So, Rocket to Russia, you are essentially a clandestine cleanup crew sent by the government to do a wet works job on the island to restore order. But when you get there, you find there's all these monsters and all this stuff that like it wasn't on your radar when you got into the sub to go to the island. So that's 2005. 2007 is when Point Nemo takes place. It's 2 years later. There's a billionaire who hears about Point Nemo on a podcast called I Wish I Didn't Know. And it's his favorite conspiracy theory podcast. He puts a documentary film crew together to go film in Point Nemo doesn't tell anyone that there's an actual island there. You shipwreck on the island, and instead of being like a military like bunch of badasses, you're like a celebrity chef. You are, the mechanic on the boat. You are, an MTV VJ. Like you're there, and now there are these monsters, and there's all this mystery and weird stuff happening on the islands. You're not rolling up there with like M4s, grenades, and like shotguns. You have like a broken oar. The chef's got a meat thermometer, and like you have to figure some stuff out, and you're going to explore the island and learn the secrets of the island while trying to survive and find a way off the island.
Are there all kinds of sci-fi toys that they can integrate with on the island, given that all kinds of space stuff's been falling there for decades?
Oh yeah. And I mean that's like the fun for me is like coming up with monsters and coming up with cool weapons. I'm very friendly with Levi from Planet X Games. He has been great about like kind of educating me about how to run Kickstarters and like we talk about writing and like, he's my buddy. And so like, he's been so kind with all his knowledge. It's like, how do you like repay someone for doing something for you like that and really helping you kind of get your start in this part of the business? So we always talk about Grindhouse. We always talk about like, movies and stuff like that. So I love the idea of the flamethrower from The Thing. And I love the idea of a chainsaw from like Evil Dead. And so peanut butter, chocolate, two great flavors that go together. I created the flame saw. So it's a backpack flamethrower with a chainsaw attached to the front of it. It
Oh,
does
nice.
crazy damage. And as a nod to Levi, I call it the Brother Levi flame saw. So it's in my way of like saying thank you and also putting this badass flamethrower chainsaw in the game. And then I was actually rewatching Gravity Falls with my girlfriend, uh, and the sister has a grappling gun, and I was like, God, growing up, I still love Batman. I love Batman. And Sam Raimi has entered the chat. That is like that's timing. You can't fake that. But I thought about it. I was like, man, then I'm Mallrats, like Jane Silent Bob. Where does he get such wonderful toys? And so I was like, I got to figure out a way to get a grappling gun in the game. Bionic Commando, all that stuff. So I came up with the Sister Mabel grappling gun. There's a special sword you could find in the game. I put a nod to Jesse Ventura's Predator character somewhere
Nice.
hidden in the game. It's great fun for me to be able to figure this out.
Is there a so I noticed it said that you could play this after the rocket to Russia. Is it presumed that or maybe I shouldn't ask. I don't know if I should ask a spoilers. I was gonna say, is it presumed that the rocket to Russia folks are still on the island when Point Nemo takes place, living or dead? Is there do you have like a main continuity you're building off of since you're putting these modules kind of in a timeline? Is there
Yeah,
some
there is. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens on the island is further explained in Point Nemo. Like in Rocket to Russia, you could play Rocket to Russia cover to cover, not play Point Nemo, and have a completely satisfying game experience. Um, you could play Point Nemo cover to cover, have a completely satisfying game experience if you play both of them. There's a couple little things in there that will pop up or connect directly to the next one. Where I've run it for tons of people. We play tested the heck out of this thing, but I recently, I ran Point Nemo on Plus One Experiences channel, and I ran it for the same three people that I ran Point Nemo for just recently later. And when things pop up in the game in Point Nemo that attach to Rocket to Russia, you get a pop. You get a really great pop. And, either you could run them separately, run them together, but you're going to have fun either way. It's a hell of an adventure.
nice? Or do you foresee a lot of stuff? It seems like so now you're gonna have two adventures that kind of pivot around Point Nemo. Is this going to be a central location for a lot of stuff 3-2-1 action, or do you have other places in mind that you want to explore?
We got other places in mind. We have, I was gonna say that Point Nemo is the end of our time on the island, but we actually, um, the next one takes place in essentially like the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. 3-2-1 horror. The main
Ah, the Pine Barrens.
Yeah. Um, the three horror things that we have so far take place in New Jersey. We actually have someone in the works who's probably going to write another
So
adventure.
we're talking Newark, Jersey City, and Atlantic City as the three horrible things in New Jersey.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of other places, but one's gonna actually be in Clifton. I actually staged it in Clifton. One's gonna be in the Pine Barrens. The third one, it's kind of up in the air right now, but they're all gonna be pretty much based around New Jersey. Um, the other things that we're going to be actually in the process of, once we get through horror, we start writing a fantasy. We have a fantasy game that does not take place in New Jersey. We're in the process that's going to be for later next year, and then we're going to pivot towards heists, and we have a Western one set. We got the broad strokes of the Western one set as well, but we're in the process of also starting to, after the new year, hire other people to start writing adventures for us to really support the system, because we want to consistently put out adventures. We want to have other people help put out adventures, really support the game that we've come out with. The island, though. So I thought we were done on the island with Point Nemo, but then George hits me up like as we were in the process of like finishing Point Nemo and sending it off to the editor. He's like, "Hey, buddy, I think we should do something cool for the backers. For the people who back Rocket, people who back Point Nemo. I think we should write a Christmas, honest to goodness, holiday special on the island and just give it free to everyone who backed us as a thank you for getting behind 3-2-1 action in our first year." And I was like, the paint didn't even dry on Point Nemo yet, but we did it. We wrote an adventure in the rules, in the rule book, that we're giving the PDFs away for free forever, because we want everybody to play our game. We want to always have it. So if you want to check it out, you don't have to throw some money down. You can just download the PDF, learn the rules, play our game, maybe tell your own stories with it. But we believe in what we're doing so much that we want everyone to play it. And also, by doing that, we don't have to put the rules in every single book, because that, as a first time publisher, I found out exactly how much everything costs,
Mm.
paper especially. So we always want people to have access to it. But in the rules, there's the Amphicora, or the fish people on the island. There's an Amphicora named Kevin, and he is walking you through the rules in there. So we fell in love with Kevin. Cheese Hasselberger drew Kevin for us. And the idea of this Christmas story is that on the island of Point Nemo on Christmas Eve, Kevin has to bring history's greatest heroes through space and time to help him fight Krampus on Point Nemo and save Christmas. And I use air quotes for heroes because you've got like Divine, you've got like Elizabeth Bathory, you've got like Ned Kelly, Montezuma 2, Hammurabi, Timo Gozin, Madame Curie. And each one has like Leif Erikson. Everyone has crazy stuff that they can do, but it's an honest to goodness Christmas special. Like, Rankin and Bass, crazy. Like, you could actually just imagine them being those little Rankin and Bass characters, but like blowing stuff up and fighting Krampus. So we on
What
December
could be
15th.
more holiday than that?
Yeah, exactly. December 15th, it'll be released. We'll send it out in the Kickstarter update for everybody. We are actually going to send everybody a postcard as a thank you from George and I. The game will probably get to you over the internet faster than the postcard will, because it's the holiday season. But the minute that we get the backer information, we're sending postcards out that day, and just want to thank the people who got behind us in our first year. And the
No,
Christmas,
that's really nice.
it's ridiculous. It's so fudging ridiculous.
I heard you mention heists. Heist is a very interesting subject in terms of games because, especially when you're trying to run a game in a heist in a game that isn't necessarily made for heists, like D&D, there's a lot of issues. When you're thinking about conceptually a heist, what elements do you find are part of that? What do you latch onto? These are the sort of iconic heist bits that we need to make sure are represented in the game, and then B, what mechanics are you thinking of dropping in the rules to help support those iconic moments?
That's a great question. So in our stats, we have action, brains, brawn, cool, charm, and guts, right? Cool is going to come in a lot more prominently in something like 3-2-1 horror. Because these games are beat 'em up. You're running, you're fighting stuff. So really, you're going to be focusing on like brains, brawn, action, and doing damage. But the charm one is something that I feel really strongly about. And I think like charm is kind of almost not necessarily used wrong in many RPGs, but it's just not used to its full potential, like what it's really there for. So in something like a heist, you're going to be relying on charm. Like, you can't use charm against your fellow players. You can't take agency away from your fellow players. But against NPCs in a heist, charm is very important. If you're the grifter, if you are the confidence man, if you are like trying to gain access to something, or like trying to get someone to do something that may be not what they showed up to work to do that day, you're going to need charm to do that. Cool is going to be another mechanic that plays heavily in there because you really need to keep your cool as you're trying to do all this stuff. Brains is going to be very heavily featured in the heist, but there's going to be added rules like something that will generate off a D10 chart that will cause chaos, because obviously in a heist not everything's going to go right, not everything's going to go to plan, so there always needs to be that chaos that kind of appears out of nowhere that throws a monkey wrench in everything, and then you have to react to it. I mean, there's going to be combat, I'm sure, but it's not going to be as prominent as something like Point Nemo or Rocket to Russia, because if you're firing a gun, you need to have a damn good reason to fire a gun. If you're throwing a punch, if you're trying to do whatever, like, it's going to have immediate consequences that are going to have more of a ripple effect than, say, trying to stop like a shark person from trying to eat you in a jungle.
Yeah, for sure. So when you look at a heist, what are the elements that you get going? Like, what do you pick out as on your whiteboard of, hey, these are the kind of moments in the game that we think are iconic in a heist? What are your kind of top 3 or 4, or
Top 3 or 4,
however many? 5?
definitely like pickpocketing like the lanyard or the badge to gain access, cracking a safe, doing some kind of crazy acrobatics to maneuver out of certain areas, the conversation where you're building confidence to gain access to the thing you need to gain access to, finding your mark and executing your plan. I love heist movies. I love, like,
So it sounds like you're going for like a Ocean's 11 kind of vibe.
Exactly. Ocean's
Not
11.
not the Heat takedown of the bank kind of heist.
Not the Heat takedown. I mean, granted, you could play it that way. You could absolutely play it that way. But man, like, this is more like, like Leverage, more like the Ocean's movies. The real kind of like, everyone really needs to work together and everyone really needs to do their part, and then everyone really needs to change things on the fly when stuff goes wrong, because it's inevitably going to go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of, I never played it. I never really watched the show, and now I'm just blanking on the name of the show, the one you just mentioned.
Leverage.
Leverage. But I heard good things. There was a video game, a role playing game based on Leverage that actually was quite good. I think it's out of print now, but I'm wondering, did you ever play it? Did you ever look at it? Did that inspire you in any way?
By the time I heard about it, it was already it was already not really around. I never played it, but I always, I want to go back and check it out now, but I kind of, I was always kind of weary of tie-ins to TV shows and like RPGs and stuff like that, because, after playing D&D and playing other, like, kinds of RPGs, there was always that kind of stumbling point where it's cool, but then to actually do the thing that you need to do to make it what is special about this show, you can't do. So I mean, if John Rogers is listening, if he wants to do another Leverage RPG, I'm your Huckleberry. 3, 2, 1 action. It will be the perfect Leverage RPG. But yeah, it's definitely on my menu to check out, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, heists, they just come up a lot. I mean, I made a video on this, and from an OSR, I think, standpoint, and what I've tried to say is, because you get GM saying, I want to run a heist.
Yeah.
But if you're not playing the game that's heist the game, how do you corral your players to get them to do the heist kind of stuff when they don't know they're playing the heist? And my answer is usually, you could make sure the options are available to them, and you can make sure they know that they work. That if they do case the joint, if they do pickpocket the lanyard, if they do charm the guard, that those things actually have a payoff to them, as opposed to someone saying, nope, not going to do that, or nope, not going to do that. Or, if you look for gaps in the guards and you say there are no gaps, well, then, if you make sneaking in impossible, then they're not going to do it, kind of thing.
Exactly.
So I'm always interested in these games that are really sort of focused around the heist. It's something I forgot to ask you earlier. I guess I'll ask you now. Did you ever look at Powered by the Apocalypse or one of those other kind of systems as a basis for running things like Point Nemo, or did you go essentially directly straight to writing your own rules for it in your thought process?
Yeah, I played a bunch of games during the pandemic. Monster of the Week. We did, Kids on Bike wasn't run by Power by the Apocalypse, but Monster of the Week. We did Casket Land. Power by the Apocalypse, I think, is a great system. Hey, the Red Caps and John, yes, get in the van. I think it's a great system, but I kind of felt like if I was going to do it, I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to do my own thing where I knew I could, every time I hit a limitation or I had an idea and I had to work my way through it, I didn't have to worry about working my way through it into someone else's system. Like I could kind of get more mileage out of it by building it out of my own system. And also, when I was doing the first iteration with like with the OSR style rules, I was like, man, I can't believe I got to give like 2 pages to every book to the OGL. So,
I know.
writing your own rule system is, it's challenging. It's a lot of work, but man, like it's 2 pages in every book. That's more art or like literally anything else other than, putting over wizards.
One thing I appreciate in the back of your book, you had that kind of quick start rules. Or though, is that the version of the rules that's included in the other ones, or is there a full version of the complete rules in the other
So
books?
in Point Nemo, there is the full version of the rules. Soup to nuts, full version of the rules. On the PDF is the full version of the rules. In the back of Point Nemo, there is that quick start as well because we wanted people to just be able to kind of look through that really quick. I mean, the rule set is like what, like 20 pages, maybe? I don't know. Like it's not very long at all. But even that, like I just wanted to throw that in front of someone at a table and just say, just worry about this, and the rest will come as we play. The one thing that we thought of everything. The one thing we actually forgot was to make a character sheet. So the character sheet
Ah,
came later. So on our itch is a free character sheet you can download. Cheese Houseburger designed it for us, drew it up for us, and whatever. But um, yeah, I mean, the rules will always be free. They're not going to get printed in every book, but they will always be free and accessible for everyone to play. We're going to have physical copies of the rule books if you can find us out in the wild. We give them away and stuff. They're going to be part of the Kickstarter. Every physical tier is going to have a copy of the rule book in there as well. But yeah, I mean, when the new style of games come out, there is going to be a couple pages in the beginning where it's like, hey, these are the new rules that you need to know to run this game. So it'll probably be like a page or two. But then, and eventually as the more rules come out, we'll just keep expanding the rule book and just keep.
we make some kind of compendium that's got the rules for all the different 3-2-1
Oh
variants.
yeah, definitely down the line, we'll totally do that because again, I want to encourage other people to tell their own stories and give their own adventures, and sometimes you just need those gimmick rules to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, I think the quick starts and like those beginner boxes and all those things are
Oh, I love.
amazing.
Yeah,
And it just given the success of like, I think of the D&D ones, I think how long it took them to try to actually make something like that. I mean, I know I have the basic box from the BX set, but it is not nearly, I think, as streamlined and everything as the one like the Essentials box set or something. I think from an adventure standpoint, running B2 Keep on the Borderlands is a bit more challenging. I think it asks you to do a lot more, I think, than say whatever I forget, the Dragon
the
of Ice
Lost
Spire Peak
Mines
or
of
whatever it's called.
Landar or some
Yeah,
Falandar.
Lost Mines of Fandelver. Yeah, even though the Fandelver has some wrinkles, it's like those wrinkles are everywhere in B2 because there's basically no plot
Yeah,
other than you're here, bad guys are over here. You figure out how to get to A to B and what to do when you're there, and
that's it.
give it a shot.
Yeah, man. I mean, like the Alien box is great. Call of Cthulhu box great. They just did a Rune Quest box. I'm excited about that. It's good to have entry points like that for people who've been curious about getting into games, and it's a less of a hurdle than buying like $350 books and then
I
being like,
know,
I really like this.
totally. I mean, every time I see the question on I don't know, Twitter, Facebook, wherever about somebody saying I want to play, how many of these big books? I think I almost always say just get the box first. It's like $30. It's got everything you need in there, including dice, including an adventure, the whole thing. And then if you love it, you can start investing in those $50 ones. But man, the price of the box for what you get in it, and it's half the price of just one of the books you'd need.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna spend $30 going to a movie that you may not like, but here you get everything you need for hours of adventure. And if you don't like it, you didn't spend 150.
Well, that's definitely true. I heard you said you went to Gen Con. Do you go every year?
I was going every year. The year before the pandemic, I was my day job at the time. I was too busy. I couldn't get the time away to go. And then I was gonna go the year the pandemic. I was gonna go to GaryCon. I was gonna go to Gen Con the year the pandemic hit, but you know, that went the way it was gonna go. But yeah, I can't wait to get back to cons. I'm gonna go to PAX Unplugged in Philly.
Hey,
Um,
I'm going there too.
and we'll meet up. We'll definitely hang
Absolutely.
out. And then I'm gonna go. So my flight kept rolling over every year, so I'm all booked up to go to GaryCon. I got
So
GaryCon.
okay, you gotta explain this to me. And
Yeah.
this, I apologize for those in the chat who don't live in this part of the USA. How? Because I was gonna look at going to GaryCon. I think I was looking at the pandemic hit, but what tripped me up is the transportation. How do you get? So you're in New Jersey. I'm in New York. So we have airports in common, everything else. How do you get to GaryCon? Because it seems like either you got to. I don't even know. I was just trying to look at routes, and I was just befuddled because there's no direct access between, as far as I can tell, the New York metro area and Lake Geneva.
Well, I live theoretically 15-20 minutes from Newark International Airport. If I was down further south Jersey, I would have fly out to Philly, and it's a direct flight. Like you can get a direct flight.
Oh, you
I,
can from Philly? Because
oh
I
yeah,
remember when I checked from like JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, I don't remember seeing anything going to Lake Geneva
yeah.
directly.
I mean, you got to pay like $50 more, but what's your time worth, you know? And so I got a direct flight out of Newark, going to going to Lake Geneva. I got a car. I'm gonna get a rental car, and I'm going to from the airport go to Noble Night Games, which is the sponsor of the Vintage RPG podcast, because I am dying to like tour the place. And then I'm gonna go to GaryCon, and I'm gonna meet up with a bunch of friends there, and we're
I feel
gonna.
like touring that place is gonna. To me, I just have this vibe that's gonna look like the warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they're wheeling the Lost Ark into just the.
That's what Jess tells me, and I'm dying to get my eyes on it. But yeah, I mean that's when I one time we went to Gen Con, and going direct from Newark to Indianapolis is like comparatively like no money. It's like getting a flight to Vegas. It's not very expensive at all. And we booked on this one day, and the price differential between flying economy and flying first class was like $30. And so I looked at George, and I was like, I've always wanted to know what it feels like. Let's do it. And so we flew first class for like on an hour and a half flight to Indianapolis. And I mean, the, I can't really ever afford to do it again, but man, I'm glad I did it once because it was awesome. But yeah, I mean, I would get direct flights out there. There was a point when I was
Man, I did.
traveling.
Maybe I was just looking poorly because I swear I looked. Maybe I didn't include Newark in my search, but I didn't see any direct flights, and it was all about like going to Chicago and then driving X amount of hours or
Yeah,
going to like Green
United
Bay or something. I don't know.
United still does direct flights. American Airlines, when I was looking, I didn't see anything direct with American Airlines, but I have flown enough and I've driven enough places where like if I could take the direct flight for a few bucks more, mentally,
Oh, no
physically,
question.
it's worth
No,
it.
no
But
question.
we
Yeah, the amount you can, even with work I try to do now is everything I can fit in the overhead, I guess, which is like most travelers try to do now is avoid
wait,
avoid the carousel as much as possible.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, just not having to mess with trying to run potentially across a terminal or between different terminals, and sometimes you think you have more time than you do, and yeah, or you could just be there at,
yeah.
at your final destination.
I
Can't beat it.
I've traveled a lot, man. I spent many years on the road in bands. I spent many years on the road as a traveling salesman. Um, if it doesn't fit in a carry on, I don't want it. And for Gen Con too, like George and I, the first couple years we went, we drove there. We drove out there together instead of flying out there. And like when you weigh it all out, because now Uber is so prominent, like we didn't really need to drive. We just you fly there, you get an Uber, or you stay at the hotel that's in walking distance, and you just you end up saving more money and your own headache by flying out there. But yeah, Redcap's talking in the chat about going to
North Texas. Where is North Texas RPG Con?
I don't
Is
know.
it
I know
San
Levi's
Antonio?
going.
Is it Dallas? Oh, Redcap says right next to DFW. I have not been to North Texas. I have actually not been to any gaming conventions at all. I've only been to a couple of
Wow,
Comic Cons. The New York Comic Con I went a few times.
very crowded.
So this is my first one. So I've never played in any con games. I've definitely never stayed overnight, to anything, or really, like I said, attended any cons that were specifically game centric. So I'm super hyped to be. The other thing, which is just annoying in this area, and maybe it's a little bit different in New Jersey, but you get very few kind of gaming cons in New York City because it's just too expensive. It's just I can't imagine where you would have to rent a space to get a big enough space and everything. So I feel very poor in that regard. And then I lived in Texas for many years, but this is where during the time when at least me and my group, we were always, and I don't know what your experience was, but the fact that we played role playing games was extremely kind of on the down low, sort of hush hush, and we weren't really keen on going and playing in con games. It really didn't appeal to me as something to do until much later. We were kind of like, hey, we're powerful as people, but we'll just we'll be doing our own kind of thing. So we just never. None of my friends were doing it. I wasn't doing it. So when I was a lot closer to doing things like North Texas RPG Con or some of the other ones around there, I wasn't really interested in doing it. And then when I finally got interested in doing it, I don't live close. I mean, the PAX Unplugged is probably the closest of the ones. Maybe that, or I know they run one in Connecticut. Might be technically as close.
Yeah, I mean, pun intended. You're rolling the dice when you're playing a con game because you don't know the other players at the table. You don't know the dungeon master, and I think we've all experienced different groups that we've played with, and sometimes it doesn't always even work with people that you've known for a long time. So it's a matter of being comfortable enough to sit at that table. I mean, I've run games at Gen Con. I've run games for cons online. Um, I'm like super easygoing. Like as long as you're not like a jerk, everyone's gonna get along fine. Everyone's gonna have fun. But I can see that there is a certain kind of like, do I or don't I at a convention? Because that is also a big chunk of your time at the convention. You're going to be sitting down at a table for like 3 to 4 hours, depending on what you're playing. So, I think it's really cool that when people have the opportunity, ability to get to conventions, if you're especially in this business, it's cool to get out there. It's cool, like, and it might not be for everybody. Like once you get to like, this is kind of like, I don't know, not different than I'd expected, but man, it's good to try at least once.
Yeah, it's something I'm going to do more of. Now that especially now that I'm doing these things like interviews and all kinds of stuff. Like I was able to get a media pass uh, PAX
Oh, it's
Unplugged,
great.
which I was shocked. I got a media pass for Gen Con 2, even though I wasn't able to go. But I was just, I think my wife couldn't understand how giddy was the fact that I actually got one. The fact that I did. I think I posted on Twitter like I'm just going to take a wild flyer here and see if they'll give me a badge. And when they did, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I don't know what they were looking at to think that I'm worthy of a press badge, but I will take it. And so now I got the one for PAX, and I'm actually going to use it. But it's hilarious. But it's interesting. I'm just so happy for the people who get to grow up in this. I know there's still all kinds of factionalism in the RPG world, but I remember being with my friends back in the day, and for us, gaming was something we did like undercover. Like if you were in a bar, we would talk about it quietly, and we thought there was anybody around listening to us, we would not talk game stuff, and we'd always have a kind of our gamer radar on the lookout where we might see or hear somebody making what we think is a reference, and then think like, should we go talk to them, or we don't want to blow our cover and be exposed at this bar where we might be trying to pick up women or do something like that, to have them know that we're gamers, we're nerds. So we got to like keep it. And now people, it's like a selling point, and people, it's actually like a good thing, as opposed to what I grew up with is you just kind of do it, and tell as few people as possible that that you don't think are gamers that you're taking part in the hobby.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really great time for the hobby. I think it's cool because, a lot of people, more people playing makes it better for everyone, because the more people are playing, the more people are going to yeah, I wish back, back before I met my girlfriend, I wish there was a D&D Tinder app. My God. But like, the more people who are playing, it means the more stuff gets to come out, more artists getting work, more writers getting work, cooler products, things that maybe wouldn't have ended up on your radar before. Like now you can do it. Like now you can have all these cool new gaming experiences. Like when I came to D&D, like I certainly don't look like a person at that point all those years ago who would be sitting there saddled up to a table. But like when I'd hear people talking about it in the shadows, like you were, I'd be like, hey, you guys got dice? What's up? What's up? You got dice? Like, what are you playing? Like, what's your character? What's your class? Like, and it would surprise people. People would be kind of like, I would have never expected you, who looks like you are going to fight someone with a giant black pompadour who's covered in tattoos, to be very excited to talk about like tieflings. But like, yeah, I mean, it's all a work, man. If you put like a cute baby or like an animal in front of me, I'm like, oh my God, look at the little friend. Like, it's all it's all kayfabe, man. But that's the thing is now everyone.
I like the wrestling verbiage. You got gimmick, you got kayfabe.
Yeah, man.
Are you a fan of the current product or the just the in the past?
I've been really loving AEW. I've been watching a lot of AEW, and also it's funny because all the people you're rooting for in the WWF are now in AEW. But yeah, I love professional wrestling. On my 40th birthday, I went to WrestleMania at MetLife, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. The Becky two belts that night. It was really, really good. But yeah, I love professional wrestling. And that was the thing too. Like up until like a few years back, like, you'd also be talking about professional wrestling in the shadows. But I think it's so cool now that it's more out there and accessible to like different people to come to whatever hobby that you're into, because everyone's like, screw it, like
Absolutely.
let's just like what we like.
Everyone's letting their flags fly. I mean, there's that one weird moment where I remember being at a bar with my friends, and the guy showed up in an NWO T-shirt, and people were like applauding him and like giving him high fives as if he were like Scott Hall or Kevin Nash.
Little too sweet ski for the good brother. Yeah.
But other than that small attitude era window, I actually no, I don't really even. It's funny for me. It's like I don't watch any wrestling now, but I read it. I'll go to the wrestling Reddits.
Yeah,
not the dirt sheets. I don't know. The idea of paying these guys for little things, especially when now with the internet, you can just go to Squared Circle subreddit and you can read. It's all you can read all about it anyway. So it's definitely been interesting. I just bummed out that I didn't get the opportunity to meet some wrestlers that have passed that I had seen in places and felt weird and didn't feel like going and talking like Roddy Piper and now they're gone.
Yeah,
that bums me out. But yeah, that's tough. Well, listen, you've been here over an hour, which is putting in yeoman's work here on the.
I feel like it.
On the stream. Anything else you want going on? You got any? I got links in the show description to, let's see, I think to the Kickstarter page, to your 321 action page. Anything else you want me to throw out there? I know you got your own podcast, so you want to.
Yeah, I am the co-host of Vintage RPG Podcast. It's been going almost 3-4 years. Stu Horvath is Vintage RPG. He's one of my oldest and dearest friends. He is the person who got me into playing Dungeons and Dragons. Lives a few blocks from me. We've been doing this podcast every week. On Monday, we drop a new episode. We talk about old RPGs, but we also talk about things that are coming out now. We like to put over a lot of new and upcoming creators and have people we've become friendly with over the years on the show to talk about their awesome products. We do a indie RPG elevator pitch brought to you by our friends over at Exalted Funeral every couple weeks, where we bring a creator come on to give an elevator pitch about their Kickstarter or whatever. But thanks, Redcaps. We appreciate it. Yeah, blame Stu for making you go to eBay and buy old books or Noble Knight. But yeah, I mean, I love learning about the hobby. Stu is the brains behind it. He really does his research. He knows everything. I don't do any research. I just ask him questions as a presenter and I pull the information out of him, and we take it from there. But that's pretty much what I do. My Tai Happy Hour, I have a pop culture podcast called My Tai Happy Hour I'm the co-host of. That's a weekly show as well. And really, though, please, if you don't mind, boogie on down to my Kickstarter. You can find links everywhere. You can find links on this show. You can find links at 321actiongames.com. You can find links on any of my social media, John McGuire RPG, on both Twitter and on Instagram. I'm constantly posting about stuff. We are very close to funding. We just had our 101st backer for this, and I would love it if you were 102 or 103 or 118. But You're going to have a blast playing 3-2-1 Action. Download the free rule set from my Twitter, from our website, from anywhere you could find it. If you got questions, hit me up. And please take a look at our Kickstarter. Point Nemo is going to be a blast for everybody.
Nice. I noticed you got in your smooth podcast voice, leaned in to get that extra sweet sound.
Yeah.
And let her rip. Awesome. Well, hey, look, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's nice that you're kind of local. Definitely. I will look for you. Are you gonna have a booth or something at the PAX Unplugged? You're just gonna be like me wandering around, or what's your deal?
I'm just gonna be wandering around here.
Running any games?
I'm thinking about it. I'm just kind of deciding. I'm trying to see. I know a bunch of people are going to it, and I'm kind of just trying to get the vibe of what they're going to do, because as much, obviously I want to go to their network, and as much as it's important to me to run the game for new people, it's also really important for me to see some friends I haven't seen in a couple of years. So
absolutely. Do you ever get other folks to run your game for you? Do you ever get have any fans or folks that go and?
I definitely do, and I definitely got more people who've reached out to me to run the game as well. If you got an actual play show you want to run it, hit me up. I would be more than happy to set you on the right path to run an action.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming, folks. I'm going to cut it here. Thanks everyone who joined. And hey, from my side, game on. I'll talk to you later. Any last words before I hit the off button?
Stay safe out there, and may the dice always roll in your favor.
All right.